I don't think the Christian life worth sacrificing if we don't have the proper image of what it means to be a Christian. It's fascinating to remember that he said a true disciple, a true Christian, simple words, are ones who will deny themselves, pick up their cross, which means suffer, die to self, and then follow me. Follow me in the way you live. Follow me in the way you think. Follow me in the way you interact with other people. Follow me by the way you defend the truth. Follow me by getting upset at injustice and oppression. Follow me by telling people about me. So follow me. That takes sacrifice. We're not going to do what those martyrs did up there in that video, being burned at the stake or being thrown off a bridge, as Jan Hus was thrown off the bridge, and you saw his quotes there, all because they simply believed that the Bible was true and Jesus was the way. We're not going to do that if we're not at the point in our life where we're ready to sacrifice everything for Jesus Christ. And so, he talks about a departure in the present. Not only says, am I being poured out like a drink offering, which if we got down to it seems rather sad, but he says the time has come for my departure, his death. Departure in this Greek means to take off the yoke on a farm animal. Now, I know you've been a farmer, but I don't know how many of you have been farmers, and you've seen and used animals for various tasks and labors across the farm. But once you unhitch the yoke, you're saying to that animal, the day's done. Your labors are over. That's what Paul's saying when he says, my departure has come. My work is done. It's over. And my time of death has come too. And so his departure was a positive thing to him. His view of death, is that yours or mine? If we were laying on a bed today and knew that we have something incurable, that's something that can't be fixed, and we resolved ourselves to die, can we say with joy, my departure's come. I'm going to be unloosed from all this sin and the labors of living in this world, this difficult world to live in. I'm not going to have to be sick ever again because I'm going to depart. It's such a positive statement. It says life isn't over when we die. Paul's saying life really begins when we depart. And since we all have to cross this finish line of life, we all have a departure. Some of you like to make a list when you're ready to go somewhere on a big trip. And so you'll make a list and you'll be packed days ahead of time, won't you? Others of us will be looking at that suitcase wondering, I can get to it in the morning of my departure. It's not always a wise thing to do because I end up always forgetting something. But in our Christian life, our Christian walk, when we know that our departure will someday be here, are we planning for it? Read 1 Thessalonians. After the end of every chapter, it says basically, will you be found blameless and pure at his appearing when Christ comes again? And so the present situation, folks, if we were to evaluate it, we would do this question here. Am I offering my life to Jesus? Just ask that, young and old alike. Am I truly offering my life to Jesus? Paul was able to say, yeah, because I continue to offer my life even now. Well, how about the past? We've all had experiences in the past where we've just wanted to give up or quit. Listen, it happens in the best of marriages when you've had tough times with your bride or groom, and you just kind of wondered, why am I with this person? And you throw up your hands and you think just for a moment, I'd rather be done with him or her. And then you get back on track, of course, or at college or school or wherever it may end up being. There are times when it gets really tough when you say, boy, I wish I could just stop for a moment and quit for a time. But of course you don't if you have perseverance. When Paul looked back at his life, this is the same man who was beaten how many times? Flogged by the cat of nine tails how many times? Shipwrecked how many times? Hungry, homeless, abandoned by friends, abused by those very people who came to know Jesus Christ. And this was a guy who said, hey, I look at my past and I say, I didn't give up. I never quit. It was tough. I made some mistakes, but I hung with it. And so he says in my past, I say, I've fought the fight. I've run that race. I have, in fact, kept my faith. Ask the question up on the board here. Are we fighting the fight? Are we still in the fight? And the Christian life is not easy. So it is a fight. Have I run? Am I still running? Can I look back and say, ooh, I know I've had a couple hurdles to jump over as I was running, but I've still run? Or maybe you've suddenly stopped over the last few months and you're saying, I know I need to get back in that race, but now it's really difficult because I feel bad about it. Well, Paul would say, don't stop now, because the last thing you got to end up doing is guarding or keeping this faith. Keeping the faith is really about keeping the Word of God. And the word for keep is guard. See, I've learned to fight for my faith. I've learned to fight my enemies outside. I've learned to fight myself because I have a tendency towards sin. I've learned to run this race. I've learned to endure. I've exercised, so to speak, to get to the point where I can keep running. Exercise would be Bible reading and praying and fellowshipping with other Christians over the Word. And I've kept the faith. I've guarded this truth that's been given to you and me. That's what Paul's saying. There's some very obvious realities when he says these things, because this is all about contention. This is all about the difficulty of life as a Christian. And using the words fight and run and guard are strong words that I think you men would like to embrace and feel very manly about it. Because each one of us wants to fight for our families or protect our families. What about our own faith? Have we decided to have as much passion about that? So all three of these say some things to us. First of all, the Christian life is hard. If you have to fight, if you have to run and not stop, if you have to guard against an enemy, then the Christian life is hard, let's be honest. But it's a joyous, hard life. The second thing it says about it is it requires endurance. It's a marathon. And it's not going to end unless we choose to get off the racetrack. And finally, literally, it means we have an opponent. If we have to fight, there's an opponent right across from us who wants to knock us out. If we have to run, there's usually somebody in a race that's opposing us and trying to beat us. And if we have to guard, just like in the army, they're guarding against a foe, an enemy. So this is a picture that Paul is being very brutally honest about. He says, listen, as I look back at my own life, I've had to learn to fight for my faith. I've had to learn to keep running when it felt like time to quit. I've had to learn to keep guarding the truth that's been given to him and to you and I. We have an opponent. It's either the devil, of course, who's constantly attacking the church, or it's the person inside of us. This very nature that James describes so readily as being the enemy within, this flesh that keeps wanting to sin. I'm fascinated by this picture of this woman, Gabriella Scheiss, in this Olympic contest. She made it. She looked like she was death-warmed over, but she made it. She didn't give up. She did all the training ahead of time to run 26.2 miles in front of the most massive audience she'd ever seen. She didn't cross the finish line first, but she finished. And each of us must look at our own lives and say, are we that tired? Or are we still with a lot of energy? But we still must keep running regardless of where we are. See, Paul's ending was a beheading. Was to be taken out to a field and either a log stump or some piece of wood that they had created, and to be bent down with his hands tied behind his back, and then for a soldier to lop off his head. This woman's ending was not pretty when you soil yourself in front of millions of people. And when you're running as if you're dying, it's not a pretty picture, but she finished as Paul did. Sometimes our faith isn't always pretty, but it's essential that we keep running. So the evaluation question is, am I still keeping my faith in Jesus? Am I still keeping my faith in Jesus, or am I keeping it somewhere else? Which means we're already out of the race.